Hi, I'm Rachel from Little Vintage Photography, and this is going to be a whistle-stop tour across the ILFORD range of papers. Using different photographic paper stock in the darkroom is a really simple but effective way of bringing some creativity and variety to your work. Choosing the right photographic paper stock for you and your work is actually a very personal choice, and you might find that it changes depending on the subject matter. And there's other things to consider, such as who is it for? Where's it going to be displayed? Is it for the wall? Is it to go into an album? Does it need to be archival? There's really no right and wrong answer. It's all down to personal choice. Generally, these papers are split into two types. We have resin coated and we have fibre-based papers, and we're going to look at some of those today. Resin-coated papers are simple to work with because they have a coating on them that makes them easier to handle. They're also quite economical when it comes to washing, so you do your develop, your stop and your fix. Then when you're in your final wash, all you need to do is leave them there for a couple of minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, and they will be done. They also come in different tones and finishes, and I've got some examples here. At the top there's the Multigrade Resin Coated Deluxe, which is a kind of neutral tone. In the centre, I've got the Multigrade Resin Coated Warm Tone, and at the bottom, the Multigrade Resin Coated Cool Tone, which has a quite silvery blue finish to it. Quick note about where it says MG on the box for these papers. That means multigrade, and that means that effectively you can use the ILFORD range of filters to change and adjust the contrast in your final prints. Going back to the examples here, in the middle we have the warm tone paper. One thing to remember when you're working with ILFORD warm tone paper is that your exposure times will be different from those that you would use with the neutral tone deluxe or with the cool tone at the bottom. As a general rule of thumb, I tend to double my exposure times and then do another test strip just to make sure I'm in the right ballpark with that. Another thing you can do is also check the manual. In every box of paper you'll find that there is a guide. You'll see that there is a table at the bottom which lists the different types of paper, and it has something called ISO. This is to do with the paper speed. Basically means how quickly does your paper react with light. Here we've got some examples of the different finishes. So at the top we've got the Multigrade Resin Coated Deluxe in the glossy finish. Moving down we've got this one here, which is the Pearl, and that has a sort of slight delicate shimmer to it. And then at the bottom we've got the Satin, which is a slightly softer touch. I like using these two papers for things like portraits actually, because they've got a bit of a softer feel to them without going for the full matte effect. Something else to think about is that the level of contrast when using these two papers is actually softer or lower contrast than when you're using something like the glossy. And it's something you might want to think about when you're choosing which filters to use on those prints using those papers. The other type of ILFORD paper is fibre-based. Working with fibre-based paper takes longer and you need to take a bit more care, but there's something really luxurious about this kind of paper because they're heavier weight. It's called a double weight, and it means that as a physical object, they're really lovely to hold in your hand. The main thing to remember when working with fibre-based papers is that the developing, the washing and the drying times are all going to take longer than they would with the resin-coated papers. If you check the manual that comes with each pack of paper, you'll actually find that there's a very helpful section that tells you about the development times. Then you've got a section about washing. With resin-coated paper, you're looking at about 2 minutes. With a fibre-based, you're looking more at 30 minutes to 45 minutes, so it's a big difference with that. If you go a little bit further down, it'll tell you about drying. And then there's a section here which is about the washing process itself. You want to fix it first, do a first wash, then you'll want to use something like Wash Aid that ILFORD create in order to help with that process, and then a final wash as well in fresh running water. All of that helps to make sure that you have the optimum use from your fibre-based paper. Fibre-based papers handle slightly differently in the developing tray, and drying them is an art in itself, but making sure you don't rush it is key. You can air dry your fibre-based papers either by putting them into a print rack or simply hanging them up. Once they're dry, I tend to put them under a very heavy pile of books for several days, or you can clip them into a glass frame, something to make sure that they're not going to curve too much. Although this process takes more time and more care, it's worth it in the end. I've got some examples here of the fibre-based papers in different tones. They also come in different finishes. These ones are all glossy, but you also have things like semi-matte and matte. At the top, we've got the Multigrade Fibre-based Classic. which is a sort of neutral tone. In the centre, we've got the warm tone version of that. Again, with this, you can use the warm tone developer in order to give that even more warmth if you'd like, or tone it at the end. And then at the bottom, we have the cool tone version of this paper. The last paper I'd like to share with you today is the Art 300. Now this is a textured art paper and is something a little bit different from the others that we've looked at. Again, it's a multigrade paper, and the effect with this is more like printing onto watercolour paper. It's a heavier weight paper, which means it will take more time and more care to get it finished properly, but for a really important project or print, there's something very special about using a paper like this. A paper like this works really well with things like the warm tone developer and extra toning at the end with something like the selenium. It's worth experimenting in the darkroom to find out what works best for you. So that's a brief look at some of the different types of paper stock you can get from ILFORD. Hopefully it will have inspired you and you will have seen something that's made you want to try it out for yourself. If you want to learn more, you can check out ILFORD's other videos. Thanks very much for watching.